Hebrews chapter 11, verse 32 through 34. It is interesting to me how it talks about all these great men, doing these great things for God, and fighting off enemies and doing things. And in verse 35, it says, "Women received back their dead by resurrection. Some were tortured, refusing to accept the release so they might rise again to a better life."
Mm-hmm.
That is such a shift in perspective. You've got it's a weird transition from doing all these great things to, and some were tortured.
Yes, and it's a deliberate transition. Yeah.
So, can you kind of explain what's going on there?
Sure. Yeah, the writer of Hebrews is pointing out how faith was so operational in all the great people of the Old Testament, and that's the thing that made them different. That they lived by faith, and things happened in their life as a result of their faith. Now, verse 32. It does mention first a list of people who, because of their faith, they were strengthened, they were given victory in battle. God did supernatural things like shutting the mouths of lions and preserving them in the fire. Of course, it's talking about Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and Daniel, Samson, and things like that. It talks about all those kinds of people. Even women received their dead raised to life, like Elijah and Elisha raised the dead. But then it turns around and says, but not everyone had those kinds of things happen. There were others who were tortured, not accepting deliverance, that they might obtain a better resurrection. Still others had trial of mockings and scourgings, that's floggings, yes, and chains and imprisonment. They were stoned to death, like Isaiah was. They were, Isaiah was sawn in two. That's the next one. There were, some of the prophets were stoned. They were sawn in two. That's a reference to Isaiah. They were tempted. They were slain with the sword. They wandered in sheepskins and goatskins, being destitute, afflicted, and tormented, of whom the world was not worthy. They wandered in deserts and mountains. So he's got a list of people who, because of their faith, we see them courageously doing the will of God and God working with them to deliver them from harm, including, let's say, fire. Others were burned up. There were some who were delivered in battle. Others were slain in battle. He gives both categories. He's saying, listen, we know that many of the great exploits done by people in the Old Testament occurred because of their faith. But we don't want to be imbalanced about this. Not everyone who has faith is delivered from harm. There are martyrs, and that's a mark of their faith too. Faith means that you're submitted to the will of God, and you're going to do the will of God, and you're going to leave the results with Him, and don't worry about a thing. Let Him worry about it. Cast all your cares on Him because He cares for you. And when you do that, sometimes you'll see miraculous deliverance. Other times not. Sometimes you'll be miraculously healed. Other times you'll die of a disease. That's God's choice. And the person of faith is the person who's willing to let God make that choice.